A lot to chew over this morning. Cabinet announced on Wednesday, sworn in. State ministers to come later on this Thursday. Already the big question is, where is MMF? What happened to the Minister of Legal and Constitutional Affairs? That's the big one coming out of the cabinet picks. Many people have been opining on why they think she has not been named yet. Some say, well, the issue of constitutional reform is dead because this opposition will not play ball, and you can't make constitutional changes with a simple majority in Parliament. You need a complex majority. I've never heard it expressed that way, a complex majority. But a simple majority won't do. You can't use government members to push through constitutional reform. You need bipartisan support. And many say with that, it is clear nobody needs to take a taxi come and tell you that there will be no constitutional reform by virtue of the absence of bipartisan support in the Parliament. Hence, it is a logical thing, some say, for the Prime Minister to scrap the Ministry of Constitutional Affairs. And if you do that, then you would have no seat for Mrs. Malahoo Fort at the table. Mrs. Malahoo Fort has her critics, but she's a fine legislator. Yes? And what is true is that she had more critics when she was Attorney General than in her recent tilt as Minister of Legal and Constitutional Affairs, where she brought a bill, she prepared, she went through all the stages of the legislative process. And of course, things came a cropper in the Parliament when the opposition carried through to say, listen, we're not supporting this because there are so many things we disagree with. So she is missing as the big name. If you've studied cabinets over time, especially the situation rather, similar to Holness's third term, Patterson had a third term. Patterson inherited a cabinet when he took over in March 1992. And by the time of the election in 93, most of the cabinet he inherited formed the first cabinet that he appointed. 97, he made a few changes. 2002, there were the 93 cabinet of P.J. Patterson had several names different. The 2002 cabinet did. This Holness administration has some of the usual suspects retaining their places in the cabinet, albeit different portfolios. And then some newbies, well, not newbies, some people have returned to the level of the executive to drive government policy and to make decisions on behalf of the taxpayers and their dependents in this country. May I say that it's pleasing to see Andrew Wheatley back. Wheatley has been on the bench since June 29 or July 29, 2018. 7 years. There's a movie called Seven. And then there's a movie called 7 Years in Tibet. Now, I don't know if Wheatley was in Tibet, but it's been 7 years on the bench. And he's been called in as one of 4 ministers without portfolio at the office of the Prime Minister. He's going to be in charge of science, technology, not digital transformation, which is still with Senator Morris Dixon. But Wheatley makes his return after a Petrojam scandal that was a scandal, but which, after all of the processes were completed, including court processes against 2 senior figures, the 2 most senior figures at Petrojam, nothing sticks. No criminal charge sticks. The men, Bahadur Singh and Grindley, beat those charges. And in terms of the administrative examination of what Wheatley did, no corruption found. And so he's back. Several people who thought that the likes of Chuck and Bartlett and so forth would have been eased out. Holness has different ideas. He says his succession plan is very much in train, but that these guys who remain sharp, remain capable, holding their portfolios for now. And it is smart to keep close to you a prime minister, smart for them to keep close to them people who don't want their throne. And as simple as you see things, as a prime minister, you always have to be watching out for those who will stage a palace coup. And I'm not saying that there's any hint of that with this JLP administration, but it's the nature of politics that these things happen where there is a sense that there's a power vacuum about to be created, or that there's a weakness at the top. And again, there is nothing to suggest that there's any weakness at the top. In fact, perhaps it is that a prime minister has never been stronger than Holness is right now. But simply because of the nature of politics, it's a smart prime minister who keeps close to him or her. People who are loyal, people who are focused on the work first, and are not prone to flights of fancy, ideas of leadership for themselves or others. King-making is a hell of a thing in politics, Some people who, on their way to becoming king themselves, want to cover themselves in the glory of having created a king. And if you are a smart observer of the politics, you can see evidence of king-making in this political process that we witness daily. And that process has been severely delayed. Some people want to kill off the process, but it's just delayed. Or is it? So Wheatley comes back, Malahoo Fort out, Audrey Marks comes back, she was there before the election, and no real surprises. People said, I spoke to a couple of people who said they were disappointed that some ministers were reappointed, because when you lead certain agencies in government and you have an idea about policy, where you want to take the entity you lead or which you are a member of the senior leadership of, and if the minister's vision doesn't align with your vision, you're going to have some problems. And some people see this opportunity, this juncture, as an opportunity for them to have gotten a new leader who would perhaps have bought into the vision they have for their agency, for the department that they lead. And so those people are disappointed that they are stuck, that they're in the same place, and that they'll have to be doing the work in a way that they believe is not efficient, is not prone, or doesn't have the characteristics of success down the road. And so they are the ones feeling a bit grumpy this morning about Holness's selections on Wednesday. I say, well, Holness came to the country before September 3 and said he had the best performing government in the country's history. That's what he said repeatedly. And so it would be very strange for him to say that and then make wholesale changes to the cabinet when the time came for him to appoint a new guard. A fresh guard. The fresh guard will be the old guard, because he said the old guard was the best ever. So it stands to reason that people should not have been expecting surprises. We know that politics is the arena for hyperbole at Olympic levels. But Holness's claim, he would have you believe, was not hyperbole. It was not what they call in marketing puffery. It wasn't hype. It was fact. And if you took him at his word, you would not have then expected him to chop and change the appointments to his cabinet. Interesting to see what he does with the slate of state ministers. I mean, there are some state ministers then who aren't coming back now. The vacancy at Labour, where Norman Dunn didn't make it on election day. Who will support Charles Jr. with his agenda? One of the questions. A lot of unfinished work to do in many areas. And so the men and women picked have a chance to go again. You know, just before the first break, the PNP especially spoke a lot in the campaign about the number of women among their slate of candidates, and rightly so. The JLP boasts a lot of women as well on the front line. And I want the country to not take for granted how far we've come. Go back to the first Patterson cabinet and the second Patterson cabinet of 1997. And what you will see is a cabinet that would have only had what? Simpson Miller, Mrs. Simpson Miller, Mrs. Maxine Henry Wilson, and Alun and Dombe Asamba. 3 women. Before Asamba was added, it was Simpson Miller and Henry Wilson. Women were rare at the level of cabinet. Now, women plentiful. Plenty women around this Holness executive, with perhaps more women to be added when the role of state ministers is announced. And we shouldn't take for granted that we aren't fettered by the things that cause significant arguments in many other democracies in the world. After the break, the ultimatum given by the PNP concerning who the speaker should be and what Paul Buchanan says he is doing to ensure that the right person is sitting representing West Central St. Andrew in the House of Representatives. After the break, Prime Minister did say, and to me it was clear, you can never assume that things are clear. You know, so it's something we always said, well, no, he made it clear, she made it clear. It's subjective. To me, it was clear that he is serious about renewing this Jamaica Labour Party, and that in time we will see those changes. So he has sent a signal. So when the time comes, night of long knives extended, he already shown his hand that he intends to do that because the party needs rejuvenation and refreshing and refresh, and that process will follow. That to me was very clear in his speech, and I imagine to a reasonable person it would also be clear to them. So that process will happen, but he's starting where he stopped with the last administration. Looking at the government senators quickly: Tom Tavares Finson, Keith Duncan, Charles Sinclair, Kamina Johnson-Smith, Aubin Hill, Dana Morris Dixon, Shireen Golding Campbell, Cavan Gale, Abka Fitzhenley, Marlon Morgan, Dr. Elon Thompson, Rose Bennett Cooper, and Christian Tavares Finson. Solid lineup. The newcomers are known quantities: Rose Bennett Cooper, Christian Tavares Finson, all known quantities. Keith Duncan, his record speaks for itself. He doesn't need to say a word. Joining a very experienced team with different attributes. You have young whippersnappers. You have a couple who are firebrand. You have steady trade unionists. In this case, you have one, Cavan Gale, who knows his way around the pasture. You have a woman who's very intellectual, Shireen Golding Campbell. She has a lot of respect in many quarters. You have the professionals who bring that professional know-how to the presentations, Elon Thompson. And you have people who can play multiple roles in the same body. You know, you have some people who they can only be a attack dog They can never be cerebral. They can never be the savant, putting things together, especially on the fly. The Senate has that as well. Fitzhenley has those powers. Morgan is not just belligerent, learned man, strong team, and the additions to it make this a good-looking government Senate. I look across at the opposition, and I'm very pleased with the appointments. I think it was, I wondered to myself if Mark Golding would have taken the chance to refresh a slate of opposition senators that, apart from some people who you always expect to be at the forefront of the cut and thrust of the debate in the Senate, Crawford, Bunting, certainly, Lambert Brown always gives, Scott Motley, if he could refresh that unit, especially with the departures of Bunting and Crawford to the House. Scott Motley to lead that bunch. Professor Floyd Morris keeps his place, so too does Lambert Brown. Those are the three experienced ones. And then 5 newbies. Keisha Anderson, you saw her at the leadership debate. Alan Bernard, a man I rate highly. Dr. Masiki Thame, very, very intelligent woman, very bright, and should make for a darn good legislator. Ramon Small Ferguson, friends in my circle, think the world of this young man. He's 33? Has the world at his feet. Cleveland Tomlinson, you'd have known him, former analyst here, and Cleveland is hugely promising. So I like the lineup. 5 newcomers, so there'll have to be some adjustments made as legislators and politicians now. It's different from the corporate world or from the classroom or from the academic halls, but the persons here have the capacity to make the adjustments and get in line with the program. To that statement about the Speaker of the House. If I was living in another time, I would have found it amazing that this statement could be issued by a party that has lost an election. But given how this PNP does its politics, absolutely no surprise. In fact, I was half expecting something like this. The statement: the PNP asserts that the office of Speaker of the House of Representatives must at all times embody impartiality, integrity, and fairness in the management of parliamentary proceedings. In recent years, serious concerns have arisen regarding the manner in which the business of the House has been conducted, including obfuscation and inordinate delays in the tabling of critical reports to Parliament from the Auditor General and the Integrity Commission under the leadership of successive speakers, despite advice from the Attorney General's chambers to the contrary. These matters have eroded the trust and confidence in the critical role of the Speaker. In light of these failures, the PNP will not support the reappointment of either Marissa Dalrymple Philibert or Juliet Holness to the position of Speaker of the House. PNP Chairperson Dr. Angela Brown Burke said, "The Speaker must serve the people of Jamaica as an impartial umpire of parliamentary proceedings, not partisan interests. Our Parliament cannot afford to repeat past mistakes. The next Speaker must uphold the Constitution, safeguard the integrity of Parliament, act fairly, and ensure balance in their rulings. For this reason, the People's National Party has no confidence in and firmly opposes the reappointment of either Dalrymple Philibert or Juliet Holness as Speaker of the House." So I saw this and I chuckled as well. And I said to I was battling with myself, how much time should I give to this statement this morning in this segment? And I've concluded not much. The JLP won the general election of September 3. The PNP is in no position to tell the JLP who to appoint to any office. The government has the right to nominate its idea of the best option for Speaker of the House. It will go to a vote. Traditionally, It's by acclamation. The person put up gets through and the matter is resolved. If the PNP want, they can vote against whomever the JLP, the government side puts up. It gets recorded in Hansard, and you have a show of hands, eyes, and the nose, and you record the result and you move on. The government has the majority, so their selection will take his or her chair as Speaker of the House, and we move on. There's no reason to go into any detailed explanation and historical context and what has been the custom in Parliament where the Speaker is concerned and the selection of a Speaker. Absolutely no need to do that. The party that lost the election cannot tell the government how to run these matters. It cannot impregnate the idea of the Prime Minister about where he or she should go with the structure of government. It lost that right on election day, and I repeat, and I'll always refer to election day in this way. The PNP asked Jamaicans, do you want us to structure the affairs of government and call the shots? Jamaicans said, no, we don't want you to do it. We want Holness and his team to do it. The most important voice in all of this is that of the people who voted on election day. So it's simple. It needs nothing more than that. And I won't waste any more time on it. I find this statement to, as I said, I'd have found it to be incredible in times gone by, the audacity of it. But this current PNP, this is in keeping with how this PNP operates, yeah? Paul Buchanan now. Statement. The PNP candidate for the West Central St. Andrew constituency, Paul Buchanan, yesterday filed an application with the constituted authority to void the taking of the September 3 poll in the constituency. The application is based on a number of grounds arising from the conduct of the poll. These include violence and intimidation in the Olympic Gardens and Malines Gardens divisions, invasion by JLP operatives of the polling station cluster at Seawood Primary School, and irregular transportation of 18 ballot boxes from that cluster to the counting center, resulting in their arrival at 10 p.m. Voter suppression in Malines Gardens division and the malfunctioning of the electronic voter identification system, which caused electors to be turned away from polling stations. Under the law, the constituted authority has 2 weeks to decide on the application and whether to send a petition to the election court. Now, I'm not going to do like some commentators do and pretend like you all know what the constituted authority is. I'm going to define it for you. Under Section 44A of the Representation of the People Act, the constituted authority comprises 4 selected members of the Electoral Commissioner of Jamaica and 2 other persons, one of whom is a retired judge and the other a member of the Privy Council. The constituted authority comes into effect whenever an election notice is issued and has the ability to halt or void elections where deemed necessary. Further to that, which I just told you, in terms of who sits on the constituted authority and what it is. The constituted authority, in keeping with the provisions of the law, is empowered, as I said, to halt an election in any constituency where and when it deems necessary under the ambit of ROPA. The authority can halt the election if there are any so-called acts of God, such as flood, hurricane, or pestilence. In such cases, the authority examines the circumstances up to about 3 p.m. on election day and determines whether there are any disruptions of 25% or more of the electoral activities. The constituted authority can also petition the election court to void an election and hold a fresh one if there are malpractices. The authority can, on behalf of a candidate or on its own motion, make a request to the election court to void an election under certain conditions. If an election is voided, it is the constituted authority's responsibility to set the date for a new election. The members are required to review affidavits submitted by political candidates challenging the results of the general election, after which the members decide what action to pursue. The options include pursuing investigations or any other actions necessary which could result in a possible voiding of the election in a constituency. If a decision is made to conduct an investigation, this must be undertaken within 2 weeks of the recommendation. For the constituted authority to recommend the voiding of an election, it must be agreed by 5 of the 6 members. It's a very high standard that has been set. The constituted authority, if you're wondering, how long does it remain in force for? After coming to life on nomination day, the constituted authority remains in place until 6 months after election day. So 6 months after September 3, 2025, the constitutional authority, 6 months and 1 day, it ceases to exist. 6 months is the life of the constituted authority once it comes into force after nomination day. So I hope I would have filled in some of the information blanks for some of you people. Suffice to say that at this stage, perhaps it is that there'll be issue taken with perhaps how Holness sits in the chair inside Gordon House, and there'll be some challenge to, I don't know, it's I don't want to make light of it, but I just find that the history of the seat, the margin that Holness usually wins by, is won in the 6 previous elections, the location of the boxes, the fact that there was no incident reported in West Central St. Andrew on the day, I just think that Jay-Z has a song that says politics as usual is perhaps the best way to describe this. Anyway, the constituted authority, 5 of the 6 of them will determine. Yeah, you only need 5 of the 6, not unanimous, but 5 of 6, still a high bar, whether or not they're going to proceed with the matters based on the allegations made by Paul Buchanan in this application. Break time, back with more after these. Must have been a brave decision for Keith Duncan to accept the invitation. Remember that it was this station that reported, it was about February when the Senate was reshuffled on the government side, that he was headed there. Turns out not to have been so, but it just has been proven now that our information was just premature, not incorrect. From the family that he springs from, as country people would say. Yeah, and I like to say that a lot, because I close to my country people, yeah. The issue of his antecedents has been the subject of furious debate on social media. There's a user on X, a prolific poster, Brushy Two String. Those on social media know whose handle it is. There's plausible denial, so I'm not going to say, well, this is so and so. The account is Brushy Two String, and those of you in the social media world know who it is. It is reportedly the handle of a former PNP General Secretary and former Member of Parliament in one of the corporate area seats. He says, Keith Duncan, son of DK, appointed a JLP senator. If you live long enough, you will see anything. I guess Keith has forgotten what laborites did him as a youth in the 1980 elections. DK cannot be resting in peace, knowing his son has so betrayed his work and legacy. My gosh. Tough language being used from the account which social media has accepted is the account of a senior member of the PNP now, saying that DK Duncan, Keith Duncan's father, cannot be resting in peace, knowing his son has so betrayed his work and legacy, and that I guess Keith has forgotten what labor rights did him as a youth in the 1980 elections. So, a question. Is it that Keith Duncan, for what happened in the 1980 elections and for the antecedents of his father's place in the pantheon of PNP legends, that hate should be so strong, or, well, it has to be hate, it can't be anything else, that the chance to serve his country at this time of his career. 1980 was how long ago? I wasn't even here in 1980. 1980 was 45 years ago. 45 years ago. What happened 45 years ago, you say, should give him cause to not accept an invitation to serve. I'm sure you will say that you know more about these things than most people do, so you know why you say what you say. Where the country is concerned, and myself as a citizen, Keith Duncan, one of our finest businessmen, an exemplar in service to this country in many capacities, highly impressive as a private sector leader, stepping up to accept this invitation, I think it's a credit to the country. In the same way that I think that several people over time who've served both administrations, when asked by a prime minister to play a specific role, have said yes, because they live here, they pay taxes here, their families live here, their friends live here. This is their country. But you're saying that something happened that happened 45 years ago should cause Keith Duncan to not do this. And the same DK Duncan who walked out on the PNP, joined Bruce Golding and the NDM, said tata to the PNP now. Done with that. DK Duncan did. That's a matter of record. You're saying his son should stay true to an ethos, to a community, to a set of ideologies. He should stay true and wedded and welded to that, which his father broke with. I'm not seeing the logic, I must admit. But anyway, Keith Duncan, fine man you are. I never particular liking for Keith Duncan because he's a racehorse man. So, all the best to you in this new journey. There's also something else that the Prime Minister said in his speech, Ian, listeners. And the reason why it's important to lay these things out is because when the time comes for changes to be made in certain cabinet roles, you know how some people are going to complain about, stalwarts being dissed. Constituents may be up in their feelings. The camp followers of certain individuals may try to stoke fires. And there'll always be the accusation, that a prime minister is trying to purge at the wrong time. Holness did say that Daryl Vaz was the leader of the group to give timelines about their political future. Vaz says he's not interested in serving out this term which ends in 2030. He wants to achieve some things and then he's gone. Horace Chang has given an interview to RGR, I think, where he said that, this is my last go around. Chuck and several others, I'm sure, would have told the Prime Minister that, leader, let me hold this together and then we see how we can transition it. So the Prime Minister's statement about transition and refreshing and rejuvenation and resetting is informed largely by the cabinet ministers themselves indicating to him that, we when the time is right and we've given you an indicator of when we think that we are good. Of course, the discretion is yours. The decision is yours. But we'll be moving on. And you should know so you can start your succession planning from now. That was indeed said and said clearly by him. So, let's see how that rolls out.